The other standard data type in Python is a tuple. So tuples are similar to lists in many aspects. The main difference between a tuple and a list is that once a tuple is initialized or defined, you cannot change the content of that tuple. So that makes the tuple immutable. Whereas a list, as I showed in the previous video, can be mutated. So the elements of a list can be changed. So let's see how to define a tuple. So the main difference in the tuple definition compared to lists is that a tuple will use the round brackets or parentheses. So if I want to define a tuple of colors, I can use the parentheses and define the color string. So let's say red, green, and blue. Yeah, just this showed up on the screen, so I better explain. I do have a extension which is called JupyterLab Color Picker. And this extension, when I type color, it will create this little square, which I can also click and select a different color if I want. This is part of that extension. Maybe at some time in the future, we are gonna cover extensions on JupyterLab. And if we do, I will add a link to this video. If you're not seeing a link, that means that we haven't covered that yet. But in your computer, you should be able to just type red and have a regular string. It doesn't make any difference on the Python itself. So we defined the tuple, and we can now see the output of that tuple. So the tuple is shown as the round brackets, whereas the lists uses square brackets. Just like lists, tuple is a data container. It can contain any type of data. It can contain functions, objects, strings, numbers, anything really. So in that regard, it is very similar to lists. Other thing that you can do with tuples is to access the data by index. So if I have color and I access the first index, index 0, is actually colors. So I see the string red, which is the first one. And then if I want to access the last one, then I see green. Actually, last one is index 2. So I see blue, which is the index 2 within that tuple. So the one thing that I mentioned that we cannot do with a tuple is that once it is defined, we cannot change a value. So for instance, if I go to colors index 0, which is currently red, and try to assign orange to it, it will not work because a tuple object does not support item assignment. So that means a tuple is immutable. The other thing I cannot do with tuple is to append. So colors.append, a tuple does not have a attribute append, just like lists have. So this is probably a good time to actually demonstrate another thing. So if I know something can throw an error and I want to handle that error without issuing or resulting in error, I can handle it in certain ways. So here I want to keep this cell to demonstrate that this tuple cannot support a item assignment. I know this is generating an error, but I want to go through that error and handle it. So one thing that we can do is to use the try. And this is what is the code that's gonna be attempted. So that's what we are trying, which is written with the tab spacing here. And the second part is called accept. And this is how we are handling the exception. You typically have to say the type of exception. In this case, we can use either a very subjective one. So this would work with any exception, or if we know the type of error that we are getting, we can also use that. So I know I expect a type error, so I can do this. So if this doesn't generate a type error and generate another error, so this cell will still generate an error. And then I can do as E, so this will return the exception that I got as this little variable called E, and then I can just print E on the screen. So if I do this and run this cell, now this cell doesn't fail because I'm handling the exception. So I know this code is generating an error, and the error it generates is a type error, and I'm just printing the error message on the screen. But if this was a workflow that I was running automatically, this error on this cell would not prevent the code from running to the next cell. It would still run, but it would print on the screen that an error was generated. But maybe this should not prevent the full workflow from running. So that's how you can handle errors in Python. But the idea here is that I'm demonstrating that you cannot change a value within a tuple once the tuple has been defined. This will generate this particular error. I would like to add a little more context around this try except. Even though this can be very useful in certain cases where it's appropriate to use it, a lot of people will overuse this. So for instance, if you're trying to estimate by domain and certain domains do not have any block to be estimated or any data to be estimated, the estimation code may return an error for the estimation of that particular domain. And in that case, people might be tempted to just use a try except and in order to handle that estimation error. However, in that particular scenario, the best approach would be to check if you have blocks to estimate or if you have data to estimate. And if you don't, you use if statements and just skip that domain in the loop. We're going to see if statement in a bit, but I'm just saying here that since demonstrating the try except way of handling errors, just be aware that it's useful, but do not overuse it. Do not abuse this in your coding. It's not best practice.